on tax reform. I've enjoyed reading some of your quotes where you've said that, there's a better way to do tax reform than, say, what you're proposing in the budget. I think you say a better way to do it is to lower rates and broaden base. I couldn't agree more. We've had all these bipartisan ideas. We've had all these bipartisan working groups. Let me just go to a couple charts, and this is from more or less my friends. Go to number 10 if you can, slide 10. A lot of folks think that if we lower tax rates, then the rich are just going to rip everybody else off, that they're going to get away with murder. Take a look at the facts. When we have lowered tax rates since 1980, the share of the tax burden for the wealthier people has gone up. 1986 is a good example right there. The share shot up. So the wealthy actually pay a higher proportion of the tax burden as those tax rates have gone down. Why? 3 reasons. We provided middle and lower income relief for families throughout that time. Cutting top rates actually increased economic growth, upward mobility, and prosperity. And third,
not so much, actually.
Well, as far as...
Alas.
Well, I'll get to the next one. We'll show you an adjustment of that. And third, we've taken away loopholes that benefit the well-off. And so... Not so much. No. So that's the point I'm trying to get to. So in 1986, we closed loopholes, lowered rates. We went from a 70% rate down to a 21% rate over that decade alone. And so let's go to slide 14. This is the CBO's chart, the index of progressivity in federal taxes. This one is controlled for changes in income distribution, which goes to your earlier point. It shows you that in 1980 to today, we are not lowering the distribution of the tax burden. It shows you that, like after 86, by closing loopholes and lowering rates, we can get better growth, and the wealthier actually will pay a higher proportion of the burden. So, and that's controlling for changes in income distribution. So the point I'm trying to make here is there ought to be a bipartisan element of compromise here, because what we've shown, for those who are worried about the distribution of the burden, you can actually keep higher end people paying more of the tax burden and get a better system, but we need another round of base broadening and rate lowering.
Can I respond on this?
Back like weeds since 1986, so it's time for a new round. That's my point.
Can I respond on this?
Yeah.
As I said, I agree with you that we're gonna need tax reform. We should all embrace it. The basic elements of what you're going to need will lower rates and broaden the base. So let's talk about
individuals as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what I think separates us still in terms of basic strategy. The dominant plans out there that have bipartisan support, Simpson-Bowles, Domenici-Rivlin, the Senate 6, share in common with us a basic recognition that you need, through tax reform, to find a way to generate a modest amount of additional revenues. So in our proposal, in our budget, revenues this year of GDP would rise modestly back up to around 20%. That's slightly lower than where they end up in Simpson-Bowles, but a little higher than you're going to get through current law, about 1 percentage higher. And I think in your framework last year, you'd show revenues rising to 19% of GDP.
Right.
Although you don't necessarily explicitly embrace revenue-raising tax reform, you're sort of assuming growth will bring that, which I don't think is possible.
Does. Right.
But so I think the two main differences between how we think about this today, but we'll have to test this when we start to get serious about it, is a explicit commitment you need from both sides that as part of a balanced plan, you need tax reform that's going to raise an additional 1% of GDP in revenues.
So putting all of that aside.
And hold on, one other difference.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, how do you want to allocate that burden? And sure. in Simpson-Bowles, Rivlin, Domenici, and in the Senate 6 proposal, and we would take the same approach, is you're going to have effective tax rates, which, as you know, are very low at the high end. You have to have effective tax rates go up modestly, and we think they should go up really only for those top 2% of Americans.
So let me get you there just because the time is cutting out, and I want to be he's got to go to a signing thing. I want you to go to this. Yeah, it's actually bipartisan. That's not what you're proposing in this budget. No, everything you're saying sounds great, but you're proposing to raise tax rates and then add more complexity to the tax code. You have all this green stuff, all these tax credits.
As I said in my opening remarks, we're showing you, we're trying to make, in some ways we're trying to motivate tax reform, because we're saying to you, if you have to raise...
By proposing the opposite of it in your...
No, I want to be clear about this. We're saying that if you have to raise, as part of a balanced plan, 1% of GDP in revenues, as every other bipartisan proposal has said you have to do, and you're going to do it on top of the current tax system, here's some ways to do it. But we're saying that, and the President said this over and over again, we think the best way to get there is through rate lowering, base broadening, more simple, more efficient, and more fair. But the main fundamental difference between us is how much revenue are we going to leave. If you guys can commit explicitly to raise revenue through tax reform, we'll be on the way. But then we'll have a debate about who should bear that burden. And our judgment is the top 2% of Americans should bear that burden through a higher effective tax rate. That's our judgment.
Okay, let me get you there, and I'm going to have the last word. Else we'll keep going around, and I'm not trying to pop you here, but this is what's frustrating to us. Your rhetoric never matches your actions. I'm not talking about you personally. I'm talking about the administration.
I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair, Mr. Chairman.
No, you're showing us a budget to raise tax rates and add complexity to the tax code.
Right. When you're with the burden of governing
tax code. So
the burden of governing when you propose a budget, as you know, is
this is your fourth one.
That's right. Exactly.
And you haven't proposed what you've said in 4 budgets.
No, that's not true. What we said is here is what you have to do as part of a balanced, comprehensive deficit reduction plan if you're going to get enough revenues out of the system to do this in a fair way. Here's what you have to do. And what we propose to do in this context is to modestly increase the effective tax rate on the top 2%.
The top effective rate goes to 44.8% on individuals. Now, here's
not the top marginal rate, not the top effective
marginal rate.
Not the top, but
you throw the pep in the peas. Well, first of all, just assume for the sake of arguing that I'm right, which this thing's been fact-checked a million times. I know, yeah. The point is, yeah, exactly. The point is, you're raising effective marginal tax rates. In Wisconsin, 9 out of 10 businesses file as individuals. You know, we're only
going to raise them if you decide to agree to raise them, and you decide you'd rather not do comprehensive tax reform. But you're right; they will raise effective tax rates in the top 2%.
I just want to be kind to everybody else. These things you say you're not putting in your budget. This is the 4th budget.
We're not.
We hear all this happy talk about coming together.
But Mr. Chairman, we have never.
But we don't see those proposals in black and white in your budget.